I appreciate y'all having me up here. Want to say what an honor it is to be speaking in front of you guys. I know what you're probably thinking, what does a 27-year-old have to say to a bunch of you guys about how to be a man, right? But before I get started, I want to share a funny, thank God Hap Roberts is here, right? Because now I can share the story. At the Oyster Roast, I had the pleasure of talking with Hap for a minute before we sat down and ate, about his first Everyman's Bible class. And which was when, by the way? So he told me in that first Everyman's Bible class, there's a guy named David Church who was he was late to class, and Hap was sitting back there in the back, and David Church spills in late, and apparently I don't want to get the story wrong here, but he had a some sort of lesion somewhere where he wanted, and he wanted to.
And he said I had to have surgery this past week at the VA hospital. And all of a sudden he pulled his pants down. Boxer shorts with hearts. And he showed us on the cap behind his leg where he had the surgery. So then after a little coaching, he put his pants back on. Al Hoffman is a teacher that Sunday. You're just glad you didn't have him. Very relaxed. Anything in here. I told my wife afterwards I found my Sunday school.
So I'm not. Hopefully, I won't make too much of an ass of myself up here today. So. For those of y'all don't know me, my name is Gabe Steinman. I grew up here in Salisbury, North Carolina. I grew up attending First Presbyterian Church after my parents moved over from the Methodist Church. I went to Salisbury High School and then on to Chapel Hill, go Heels, for undergrad, and then NC State for veterinary school, go Pack. Some of y'all might call me a bandwagon. To that I say I don't care. Hence the purple today, right? So I've lived and worked here in Salisbury for a year now as a veterinarian under the apprenticeship of my dad and my grandpa Charles back there, who decided he would come today. So thanks for coming, Chuck. So today I want to talk about a couple things from the eyes of a young lion. Being a man today is a tricky business, right? We're in an age of cancel culture, of political correctness. Choosing to speak comes at a cost. So how do we navigate these muddy waters? Who do we turn to when we need an example of how to be a man? So the first thing I'll do, so I can go like this. All right. So the first thing I want to talk about is what it means to be a mentor. So number one, being a mentor is a crucial role that we as men must fill. And the ultimate mentor was Jesus, right? Paul says in 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1, follow my example as I follow the example in Christ. And Corinthians, from my understanding, is a passage where Paul is telling the people of Corinthians like how to be Christian, how to follow God's will. So what does that look like as a disciple of Christ? It's studying the Bible. It's praying to God. It's living out His will. In my own life, I can think of many good men who have mentored me over the years, including Boy Scout leaders Mark Lottis and Scott Robinson. At home, it's been my father and my uncle and my grandfather, Tim, Todd, and Charles. In the church, it's been Brian Douse, Sean Grubb, Alan Fowler, Alan Cook, and now Josh Gritter. And I'll never forget sitting over in the last lecture of Jim Duncan. In his last sermon, he quotes Tim McGraw's song, Humble and Kind. And he says, don't take for granted this love this life gives you. When you get where you're going, don't forget, turn back around, help the next one in line, always stay humble and kind. And yeah, I mean, I'll never forget that sermon. It was so powerful for me as a young dude hearing that. And what a great speaker he was, a storyteller. So to me, these men have one thing in common, and that is that they have shown me unwavering support and love. And through that, what it means to be humble and kind. So to be a mentor, right, is to pass the torch. It's paving the way for the next generation. It's something that I want to do in my own life as a veterinarian, as a community member, as a colleague at work, and within the community here in Salisbury. Although I haven't found that role quite yet, I'm still in the next 10 years, I want to be looked at as a mentor for sure. So clearly, for me to become a veterinarian and to be in the position I am now, it's clearly taken a village. I owe it to those guys and to the people in my life to put me up here today. And so, one thing I want to just briefly talk about in like today's society is how important it is to stand up and be a mentor for these young guys, right? Max and I were talking about, the men in today's culture are that we put on a pedestal aren't always the best leaders, right? You've got Tom Brady leaving his family for football. You've got baseball players with gambling addictions. What else? Would anybody else have any bad examples that they can think of? You're gonna be here for a while. Yeah, I mean, the point is like, for young dudes like that are in high school now or in middle school, it's so important for them to have somebody to point to in their life to say like, hey, that guy's doing it. He's doing it all right, right? I love to think of this analogy of like, I was going to say like the loudest one in the room is often the one that's the most wrong, right? So, so with that, what do we stand on, right? Like, okay, we're in a position of mentorship, right? Well, what do we preach? What do we tell these guys what to do? And then, so for the last little bit, I want to talk about like what some values are to stand on. So go ahead and shout some out for me if anybody got some. Like, when I think of values, I think of like loyalty and accountability, gratitude that Max talked about a couple months ago. Anybody got some? Honesty. Could do a little thing here. This one doesn't work. Let's see. Oh, it doesn't work. The blue one works. Honesty. What else? Dependability. Okay.
Consistency. Talk about humility.
I heard consistency. That kind of plays into dependability, right? Anybody else? Commitment. Right? You have to commit to something. Commitment with 2 T's? Sure. Anybody else got any good ones? Trust. Trust is a big one, right?
Enthusiasm.
Sacrifice. I know my doctor's handwriting is going to bust in here soon. You should see. I have to read Charles's handwriting every day for work, and it's like the dog went to the. And I'm like, yeah. What can I erase with here now that I've made a mess? Oh, there it is. There it is. Okay. Yeah. So the point being, there's a lot of. I mean, I could go on for the rest of the class talking about the values. These values, right? You could do a whole every man's Bible class on just trust or sacrifice. But I wanted to touch on a few that a couple play into commitment and dependability. One of those is like discipline. And Jesus was disciplined, was well disciplined, right? The word disciple and discipline come from the same Latin word. I'm not going to say it because I don't know Latin very well, but it just means pupil, right? And so when I think of discipline, I think of having a mission, and Jesus had a mission, right? So an example from the Bible, and one that I love is Mark 1, verse 35. Very early in the morning, while it was dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. And I love that verse so much because it's like, hey, look at this guy who's got lots of preaching to do. He's got lots of healing to do, but he still made time for himself and for prayer early in the morning. And I'll be honest, discipline is what got me through veterinary school. I had 8 classes each semester with 2 to 3 exams per class for 4 years. So you do the math, and that's roughly 200 plus exams. I was a decent student in undergrad, but I got hit in the face when I got to veterinary school that first semester. So I had to relearn how to learn, right? And something that I found along these lines are these stewards of discipleship that we as young dudes are looking up to now. I don't know if you guys have heard of Jocko Willink, right? Or he's an ex-Navy SEAL. And he has a famous line, discipline equals freedom, which I like a lot. And so for us dudes, it's waking up early, it's going to bed late and grinding every second in between, right? No, it was just basically saying, having a plan, putting the phone away, executing on that plan, and disappearing when work needs to be done. And then more in the Bible this year, I have committed to reading the Bible with a group of friends. And it feels like the first 3 chapters of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, and Leviticus, kind of set that tone between our relationship with God as one of lacking discipline. The Pharisees, right? The Pharisees were well disciplined, but they were disciplined of the law. From my understanding, they lacked spirit of the law, right? And so the point is, don't get your plan and your disciplinary actions confused with God's plan. And it kind of touches on a point that William Paul talked about a couple weeks ago, a month ago, or when it was, and that's, God may have something else in mind, right? So, live within boundaries and have your rules, but don't get that confused with God's will, because He has the ultimate say on what we're doing. And so the last thing I guess what I just talked about was discipline. I'm messing up the whiteboard here. And then the last thing I want to talk about is grace. I know that a lot of dudes here have spoken on grace, and grace is a complicated topic, something that I've been studying lately, and I feel like there are two definitions of grace. One being God's grace, and then the other being grace that we can show others. So God's grace, my understanding of it is, it is through grace in which we've been saved and through faith, and not ourselves, right? It's nothing that we've done to deserve. That's God's grace, right? We've done nothing to deserve it, but he gives it to us anyways. And I feel like that's a very big theme of the Bible, is the idea of what God's grace is doing for us, right? Like Ephesians 2, verse 8-9, for it is by grace you have been saved, and through faith. And this is not from yourselves. It is a gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. So that's kind of an important segue into kind of the grace that we can show other people. And that grace comes with practice, and that grace involves forgiveness. And it's something that I think that dudes, at least my age nowadays, can show each other a little bit more. I want to briefly talk about like how I practice grace and forgiveness in my own life. And then in the last little bit of class, I do want to hear some thoughts from you guys. So in my own life as a veterinarian, I try to practice grace over judgment. It's tricky, right? Because you're in the heat of the moment, you're doing stuff, and things are fast paced at our clinic, and it can be easy to judge. It can be easy to react. So one thing you kind of try and do is take a deep breath or take a moment before you react or respond to something or someone. Something I do often is I put animals to sleep. And it's something that I've kind of wrestled with, being a new doctor and doing it for the first time. But lately I've thought of it as like a privilege to do, which is weird, but it's something where I'm able to relieve suffering. You try and help people understand that. And to me, it's kind of like a final act of forgiveness and grace with both that animal, but also with the person who has spent God knows how many hours caring for that animal. A lot of times I see them in their last minutes, right? Not the years before that person has spent with that pet. So there's a level of trying to kind of, you're trying to at least make it an easy transition for them. So in that moment, I found that the biggest thing I can do is provide silence. I feel like silence speaks volumes. And I've had some pretty powerful moments, even in the first year of doing what I'm doing, where I've given somebody silence for what feels like hours. But it's been that, last, I guess let me back up, like in those final, silence minutes, it's been pretty powerful. So in closing, I guess what I'll say is, ironically, I'm going to sit here and as a 27-year-old guy, teach a bunch of you guys what it means to be a man, what it means to be a man in today's time. So I am curious to hear what you guys have to say about what it means to be a man based on kind of what I've talked about. because I know some of you guys have been through the ringer, right? You've seen way more life than Max and I could have dreamed of at this point. So if anybody has any thoughts, would love to hear some.
It's not just what you say, but it's what you do, it's your actions. With children, you'll find that you're always kind of under the microscope.
Yeah,
They're looking.
they're looking.
It's a daily struggle. You never get it all
Right.
Forgive yourself when you don't. Show grace to yourself.
Yeah.
Show grace.
Speaking of your having put animals to sleep, Dan and I had never been present, except with our last dog.
Mm-hmm.
We chose to stay in the room, and the bed was there, and it was so calm and peaceful. And you're right, it was a wonderful experience. So take that to heart.
Yeah. We always say, like, first interaction, last interaction, right, with clients. So they'll forget everything you do in between, right?
Calm, very peaceful.
Yeah. And then on that topic, I guess, like, it's not even just that, right? It's showing grace to other people. It's weird that I'm in the position I am in. I face the public every day, and I'm talking to people who are going through very different struggles than me, right? Like, I come from a place of where I did not have to worry about where my next meal came from or where I'm going to sleep that night. And I have people that come in there and they're telling me their problems that are very real and very, they strike some chords in me, and it's one of those things where you try and say to yourself, well, what can I do in that moment? And so part of that is showing them a little help right now. Don't get any ideas, Charles, but I sometimes will comp somebody on something every once in a while, right?
You have a lot of folks that come in that the animal is the only contact they have with anybody.
Yes.
They probably share all their problems, concerns with the animal.
Yes.
Like it's another person.
Yes.
And at that time when they be put to sleep, that outlet's gone.
Yes.
So they have to put that.
Yeah.
Play it as it comes.
Yeah, and they're part of the family too. So the grief of that is very real. So
Run into folks sometimes just don't have any concerns in that regard at all.
yeah.
We have to deal with that.
Something I've learned lately is that people end up taking care of their dogs better than they take care of themselves, right? There's more compliance. There's studies out there that show there's more compliance with somebody giving their dog a pill than they are taking the pill themselves, which is outrageous. But I think it speaks to the altruistic nature of us. We are very concerned about something that we care about. So,
Grace there. We can learn a lot about grace. Our dogs in particular, they do a whole lot of judging.
Yeah.
What kind of a guy I am or what I've done that day. Immediately show you grace immediately. A lot to be learned. But I think judgment is kind of a human nature characteristic that we all have to deal with and struggle with. Got a quote from my wall right from Reeves' picture there.
Yeah.
The people we come in contact, we have no idea what is going on in their lives. And show kindness.
Absolutely. I have one final story. Is there a Bible somewhere around here? We got one around here. I have a final story that I want to share that I felt was pretty powerful this week. And then and then that's all I have for you guys. But it involves my dad, and he He's not somebody that is very vocal about his faith, and that's okay. Charles and myself and him, they come from a line of people in Ohio that are very, I don't want to say quiet about their faith, but they're hard workers, but it's not that they don't believe it; they just don't project it all the time. So a lot of times I'll try and look to their actions as guidance rather than what they're telling me, right? And so one thing that happened last week was Dad was they have a storage facility out on High Rock, and there's a guy camping out there, and he's squatting a little bit, and so Tim, my dad, had to, over the past couple of weeks, we've been thinking of like, what we're gonna do, get this guy out of here. And there's some drugs involved for sure. And so something that he did that I thought that was pretty powerful was he got a police officer to go with him, and he said, banging on the door. He's like, Jason, I'm here. Like, got to get you going. Got to get you out of here. And so he got the guy out, and he said, we're gonna. I think it was something with him and his mom, and they had struck a deal where Dad had said, hey, if I can get him out and get him to you, he's supposed to go to rehab, right? So the guy said, the mom said, yes, we can help you do that. And if you can get him to me, you can get him out, then we can figure out the storage stuff, but we can at least try and get him to rehab. So Dad bangs on the door, gets him outside, and he says, we're here to take you to your mom so you can go to rehab. And in that moment, I think that the guy had kind of said, enough is enough. And he went, and I thought that was pretty cool. The past week, Dad checked back in on him, and sure enough, he's at rehab. So yeah, I hope that guy gets clean, but I think the story is trying to show a little bit of mercy where we can. So I thought that was cool, and I think Dad's watching at home, so I appreciate it, Tim. Or up in Illinois, he's moving my sister back. So I want to read Psalm 93. It's something that I like. It's got a kind of good summary of what we've been talking about here, and that is like the ultimate Redeemer is God, and so God is king, robed and ruling. God is robed and surging with strength. And yes, the world is firm, immovable. Your throne ever firm. You're eternal. Seas, storms are up. God sees storms wild and roaring. Sea storms with thunderous breakers. Stronger than wild sea storms, mightier than sea storm breakers. Mighty God rules from high heaven. What you say goes, it always has. Beauty and holy mark your palace, God, to the very end of time. So that's all I got for you guys.